Okay, let's continue with Chapter 13 into the second half of the chapter. Let's take a look at some aggregate production planning costs. And as we've learned, aggregate production planning balances production, inventory, resources, and demand. So it's trying to coordinate all of that so that we balance supply and demand. One cost is inventory, and the cost of having inventory on hand, holding inventory, holding costs. Our regular production costs, which is our average labor and benefits that it costs us to produce on a normal production schedule. Then if we have to pay overtime, more hours than standard, that would be an additional cost. Hiring. To find, acquire, and train new employees, there's a cost. There's time and cost involved in doing that. So that is a cost that has to be considered. Firing and laying off, separation packages, unemployment insurance are additional costs that a company has to bear. And then back order, lost sales, if we have to overnight ship, expedite a shipment or expedite supply to get it in, we could lose an order, we could lose goodwill with our customer. Another cost is subcontracting. If we decide to subcontract some of our work out to another company, not only is that a cost to us, but we lose control of quality control and control of how the processes are completed. We're going to look at different aggregate planning strategies, different ways to produce. The first is level, and that's where we just produce at a constant rate. And some months we're going to produce more than what we need, other months less than what we need, but we're going to just continually produce, and we will inventory any excess and then pull from inventory when we need it. So this red line on the graph depicts a level production strategy where we produce the same number of units regardless of demand. And what we can see on this chart, the blue is demand. So here in the first couple of months, demand is actually less than what we produce. So we will, this black depicts inventory, we will actually inventory those excess units because when we get in later parts of the year, demand is actually more than what we produce. So we're going to pull units from inventory. So for level production, this is our formula that we use to determine how many units we need to produce. P is the level production rate. So if we take the sum of demand for the period plus ending inventory minus beginning inventory and divide it by the number of planning periods, it will tell us how much we need to produce each month to meet our level production schedule. A second production strategy we can employ is the chase strategy, and that's where we change production to match demand and inventory remains relatively stable and low. So here you can see blue is the demand, red is the production. We just produce what demand requires from month to month, and inventory remains the same. We don't add to inventory much, and we don't draw from inventory because we're always producing to demand. So with chase, you change your production to match demand, inventory remains stable and low. There are three ways that you can implement to meet the demand requirements. One, you can produce everything in-house and vary your workforce level, either with number of workers or number of production lines. Two, you can produce everything in-house and workforce level to meet the lowest demand period and then use overtime for higher demand periods. And then lastly, you can produce everything in-house and workforce level to meet the lowest demand period and subcontract out when you have to produce higher demand. So those are your three options. The third strategy you could implement is a hybrid where you combine level and chase strategies. And here you can see how that works. You've got some inventory. During certain periods of time, you would produce level, then you would ramp up, then you would decrease back to a level, and you would use inventory to buffer those times where you're not producing to meet demand. So with the level, chase, and hybrid models, we're mainly talking about manufacturing, but you could do aggregate planning for service industries. And with service industries, there's a term called yield management, where we basically adjust prices in response to demand levels. And the reason we do that, you can't inventory services. You can't inventory a haircut. You can't inventory a concert, a sporting event, showing of a movie. You can only deliver services real time. So rather than changing production level, we modify prices to encourage customers to purchase for service at desired times. The goal is to maximize revenue and profit. Can you think of some service industries that modify their prices based on demand? Well, obviously, before COVID, the airlines, to fill seats, sometimes they would lower prices to fill up their planes. Other peak demand times, like during the holidays, they would raise their prices because they didn't have enough supply to meet demand. You'll see this with sporting events, with concerts, restaurants that have specials on off nights or off times to, again, try to build demand during those times where supply is there but demand is low. Make sure you read the case on page 458 that explains how yield management works. It's a great example, additional examples that will supplement our discussion here. To wrap up this chapter, I would like you to take a look at the solved problem on pages 462 and 463, Neil Industries. And I want you to take a good look at that. The answer is there. That's why they call it the solved problem. But make sure you understand the steps in that problem and the information, because you're going to use that same information for one of your homework problems. And in addition to walking through the solved problem, I will post a little YouTube video offering some help for your homework problems. Take care.